Welcome to Behind the Story with me, Jelani Gonzalez. Today's guest is someone who looks beyond workouts and weight loss and instead focuses on how people actually build sustainable health over a lifetime. Tim Ward is a fitness coach, author, and founder of Fitness Quadrant, a framework designed to help people stop starting over and finally create balance between physical fitness, mindset, recovery, and lifestyle. Tim's work isn't about extremes or quick fixes. It's about accountability, consistency, and building habits that hold up in real life. Today, we're talking about Tim's journey, the lessons behind his framework, and how his approach helps people not just get in shape, but stay there. Let's get into it. Tim, welcome to BTS. Thank you for being here and thank you for sharing the time with us. So I'm excited to talk about you, and in preparing for our conversation, I took a look at your website, Fitness Quadrant, and the book that you've got out. And also I see that you're the founder and you're the creator of MIT, the modified interval training. And I want to talk to you about all of that. But before we get started, who's Tim Ward? You know, before the coach, the author, the founder, who's Tim Ward? Well, congratulations on the success of the book so far. That's great. Tim, from a personal level, I'm curious how you got into coaching. So what role did fitness play in your life before it became your profession? You know, your preaching to the choir, I'm always curious about people's background in fitness and how, what it really means to them, because I always tell people I don't share a lot of the challenges that people have and what you just mentioned from a personal perspective, because I've been involved in fitness for about 50 years. My dad was a trainer, so I from the time I could walk and remember myself, I had boxing gloves on or whatnot. And even what you talked about with food, I used to make fun and said I discovered how bad food was in America from this. So I was born and raised in the Caribbean. When after university, I would go back and forth, right? And I eat the same. I've eaten the same way I've eaten my entire life, right? Every time I was in the US for 3 months, eating the same way, I gained 10 pounds. And I was never fat. There was muscle, but I would literally gain. It was almost as though someone injected me with something and I poofed up.
Yes.
To where when I left the country, they would say, "What were you taking when you were in America?" And I said, "Nothing. I was just eating." But there's so much more chemicals and so much more crap in even healthy food in America that
That's
I
right.
would
That's
literally
exactly
gain
right.
10 pounds eating supposedly healthy food in America.
Yes.
So you're preaching to the choir. I know exactly what you're talking about when it comes to that. But I'm curious, in your work, Tim, what's, like, for example, the biggest lie that you see people telling themselves about fitness that you have to pretty much relieve them of before you start working with them? Tim, here's a quote from Livestrong. I'm reading it. I wrote it down. It says, "If you want a better body, you need a better plan." How does that quote tie into the fitness ecosystem you alluded to earlier in the conversation? I know
They never
anybody
approve.
who's been to the
They
gym
do
knows,
this,
yeah,
right?
phenomenon. I'm very familiar with longevity, and I see it every day because, for example, my teacher is in his 70s, still alive, and I don't want to spar him today. And he's in his 60s. I still
Wow.
but God bless Elder Castell. He's a very brilliant person that he's never hurt me, and he would never hurt me because he's that expert. But because of how strong I know he is and his longevity, and that is sort of an apprehension of, "Oh, I don't want him to hit me." So I've seen what living properly and taking care of yourself and doing, and he's the goal for me. He's in his 70s and he's still going. He still trains. He still teaches. So I'm real familiar with that. Tim, I want to
That's
ask you about
awesome.
something. There's a phenomenon that's been driving me bananas, and you alluded to it in your book. And when I read it, I thought, that's so obvious. I never thought about that. And what it is lately, I was blaming it on social media. I would go to a gym and it's packed with a bunch of people. Like you said, it's obvious there's been no change. It's obvious they don't know what they're doing. It's obvious they saw somebody on Instagram or TikTok or something doing something crazy, so they're trying the same crazy crap in the gym. And I'm thinking, you're just in the way. Like, where did all these people come from? Social media is killing it. And when I read in your book, it's not social media, it's the population has increased. And I thought, duh.
Yeah.
I didn't think about the increase in the population So that obviously is a net increase in the gym, because what you were talking about in the book was, how is it that gym memberships has skyrocketed from 2010 to now, is what I remember reading,
Yeah,
but
you're right.
health in America has done the opposite. Like, what's going on? What's the phenomenon? Speak about that, Tim. Talk to us about that
Yeah,
whole thing. Yeah, I think in listening to you, it reminds me of a couple I met last week, and I think part of it is mental and perception, where people have this perception about fitness, which encompasses working out and eating healthy, as a chore, as something that's hard. Because I met a couple and I was just gobsmacked, because the conversation was about how much surgeries they'd had. And the man was not, and his body fat was higher than mine, for example. And the woman, she was not a small woman, and the conversation was, she went to have lipo, so I had lipo, and we had two, and we're going to do this. And I'm sitting there, and I was very not critical or judging. I felt sympathetic and grateful for my dad, because I went back to my childhood. And that's why I asked you, where did it start for you? Because I've never had those thoughts of quick fixes and cut and all that, because from the time I could remember myself, I was moving. I was involved in fitness, physical, calisthenics,
mm,
soccer, football for us,
right,
boxing.
right.
I was always moving to where that's not even something I could consider, but I'm sympathetic to somebody that didn't have the same lifestyle and background, to where that's, and they were proud that they'd never set foot in a gym. It was
Right.
almost a sense of pride of, I've never set foot in a gym. This is this and this is that. And now I'm going to do this and do that. And I just think, man, and I was doing my best not to project me onto them. I hate when
Yes.
people do that. So I
Right.
wasn't projecting, but I just thought to myself, there's an easier way, but your perception is that the easier way is actually harder. And that was where my sympathetic
Mm,
feeling came from, that, wow, you could save so much money and it's so much easier than you think, but you have a perception that the gym and eating right, this is crap, that you've actually lost the game before you've even played it. And I just felt that sense of sympathy for them, and because, as I said, it's mental as physical. I want to ask you something about your program, specifically the Fitness Quadrant that you
mm.
created. Like, give me an overview of that. Break it down. Like, what is the four quadrants? How do they work
Sure.
together? I
We don't
love
want
that.
to.
I call those people skinny fat people. You just
Yeah.
said it. I love that. Tim, if I may, let me
Right.
ask you a question. I have another question about the quadrant, but before I do, I want to ask you something that I recently started reading about, and I need to do some more research. And you sound like me in that you are a researcher. So I want to
Mm,
plant the seed and then maybe connect with you in the future, see what you
sure.
find. Only thing I add to that drink that you just said after you work out is glutamine. That's the
Hmm.
only thing. Sometimes for me, what I've noticed, because the way I train, the glutamine that's in the whey protein is not sufficient. I
Yep.
need 5 to 10 grams. And it's very rare you're going to have your whey protein with 5 to 10 grams of glutamine. And I call glutamine like the one amino acid, like the amino acid of life, right?
It.
So I'll add 5 to 10 grams to that with my sugar and the protein. But I was reading recently where whey protein is toxic and not really good for you, and that you should stick with other proteins. And I'm still reading, looking at it, and I was wondering, have you heard that or read that, or any thoughts on that whey protein? That's what I read. Yes. But it's not whey protein
It's the source.
itself of the whey protein. And when we
Absolutely.
have these labs in America that when, and I always tell people, sorry to open up the doors on the supplement industry, a lot of these supplements are made in the same labs. That's why it says manufactured for X company. Are the labs in the US using the whey protein from China, or is it an American source? Yes.
It's
Because I know you're not 160 pounds if you
right.
want to do the one
Yep.
gram per pound or
Yep.
whatever. See what happens. That was my next question. Before we talk about peptides,
Yeah.
because I want to ask you how peptides fits into the ecosystem you talked about. But before we go there, I want to ask you something about the quadrants. How do you help clients identify which one of the quadrants they're neglecting the most? How does that fix look like? And then we
Great.
can get into peptides. I'm really familiar with that, Tim, because a lot of times people will look at me and ask me, like, they'll say, hey, I'm trying to do X and I'm not having success. And I would always say, show it to me. And as soon as I see it, I see the problem because it's just obvious. And you met an exercise scientist. I met a Marine. And when I was 19, I met a Marine and I asked him to show me how to deadlift. And his name is Moline, and I love him so much. We're still friends to this day.
Yeah, that's cool.
This Marine, and why I asked him to show me how to deadlift, bit of the story, he had 405 pounds on the bar. And he was literally doing it at the rhythm of 1, 2, 3, 4, United States Marine Corps. And everything was a rep. Everything was a repetition with 405. And I'm a 19-year-old kid looking at him in awe. I was like, show me how to deadlift. And he's like, okay, come on. And I'm walking over to the weights. And he said, no. He gave me a broomstick. And he said, you need to perfect the form and the biomechanics first before I'm going to let you touch weight. And I promise you, you will never be hurt. The form with the broomstick. And this is like 30 something odd years ago. And I still remember it to this day, that lesson, that thinking. So whenever I'm doing something like you mentioned, I try to do it properly, because if you don't, you're wasting time and you're not getting the benefit of it. So I'm right there with you
Yeah.
when you're talking about looking at people and seeing that they're not getting the benefit of the exercise that they're doing because they're doing it incorrectly. And part of that is what they're seeing on social media. I would say that's one of the negative impacts of social media, because going back, you and I, old people, going back to magazines, you didn't see it incorrectly in a magazine. You just saw
That's
the
right.
stills, and the stills were always perfect posture, perfect angle. We didn't see it incorrectly, but now you see all these things on social media, and sometimes I'm looking at it going, what in the are you low? Let's talk about peptides for a bit. Now, I'm coming to this as somebody that I'm very familiar with peptides. I've used peptides. I'm not going to say which ones I've used, not because of anything other than I don't want anybody to go try something because they
Yep.
heard me say it.
Yep.
So I'm careful, but I think by telling you about the peptides, you'll know which ones if you're versed on it. There's one peptide I take for anti-aging, nothing to do with muscle or fitness. It's 100% to do with anti-aging. You take it once a year. The protocol, you take it once a year for 3 years, and then you should be good. And supposedly it adds, I think, 8 to 10 years to your lifespan. You've taken it over a period of time. There's no way to know that. I'm still living.
Yep.
How am I
Yeah.
going to know? My 13-year-old said to me, we were at the gym together this summer, and he said, Dad, how old are you again? Because we were there and the teacher was talking about, yeah, when I was your age and stuff. And my son looked to me and said, Dad, you're older than him and everybody. I said, yeah. I said, Dad, how old are you again? I told him. He said, Dad, wait, what? Why did I think you were like 35, Dad? I said, 2 years to that. Yeah, and then you'd be right. And so I say that to say I'm not some special genetic freak. My peptides must be doing something.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
So
yeah.
I know for me personally, they work, and like I said, I've used them for anti-aging stuff and for regulating the metabolism and getting rid of inflammation. Because even being healthy, exercise creates inflammation, whether you believe it or not. I've used it to reduce inflammation and whatnot. And I just don't want to say the name because I don't want some young
Yeah.
person
Yeah.
or somebody not knowing what they're doing go get some peptides and harm themselves. But you as the professional, and let's tie it into the ecosystem and the quadrant. How do you integrate tides, if you do, into your program? Lose those, everything. Help me with
Peptides.
healing from an injury from sparring. I mean, yeah, to me this summer. Tim, speaking about the book, how does the book complement your coaching rather than replace it? Tim, as we wrap up, before we go, I want to ask you some advice on behalf of the everyday person. You mentioned that you're targeting the 45-year-olds to the 75-year-olds for specific reasons. So I wonder, for one of them listening that may be overwhelmed and out of shape, what's the first thing you recommend they do after getting off from listening here? One more thing before I let you get out of here. When do you complete that next peptide certification? I want to put you on the spot. Can we have you back on to do a show just on peptides? We'll hold you to that. It was such a pleasure. Thank you so much. You've been so gracious with your time and your knowledge. Thank you so much. You as well, Tim. Cheers.